The town of Silverwood lay peacefully amidst the lush green fields, where there was no city noise, no rushing crowds. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew each other's story, from the farmers to the elderly living simply in small houses. Life there was slow, quiet, like time itself had no urgency. Emma Parker, an 18-year-old girl with bright eyes and long flowing hair, lived with her father, David Parker, in a small wooden house next to their family farm. For Emma, life on the farm was all she had known. Early mornings with the crowing of roosters, her father's voice calling her to help with farm chores, and the endless hours spent working the land that had been passed down through generations. However, Emma always felt that something was waiting for her, something bigger than the life she had. On many afternoons, as the sunlight filtered through the leaves, she would sit on the porch, gazing at the horizon. She wasn't sure what she was searching for, but she knew that this peaceful life might not last forever. Though no one ever spoke of it, every time she looked at the sky, a strange unease lingered in her heart, as if something big, something different, was about to change. One late afternoon, while helping her father unload bags of feed for the livestock, Emma suddenly heard the rumble of motorcycle engines from afar. At first, she thought it was just the usual sound of passing cars, but the sound grew louder and louder, echoing across the quiet space. She stopped what she was doing, looked toward the road, and saw the first motorcycle appear, followed by a whole group of them. Their roaring engines shattered the usual calm of Silverwood, and Emma felt a sense of dread fill her. As the first motorcycles pulled into the gas station, Emma felt a shift in the air. The peaceful town of Silverwood was suddenly disrupted by the sound of those bikes. From the first bike, a group of bikers dismounted. They wore black leather jackets with strange tattoos on their bodies, their eyes filled with contempt. Leading them was Cole Razor Matthews, a tall man with a scarred face and an intimidating presence. He was the leader of the Iron Wolves, a biker gang infamous for their troublemaking and destruction wherever they went. Emma felt a chill run through her as Razor locked eyes with her. She had heard about the Iron Wolves, the gang that had terrorized many towns. They weren't just here for gas. They were here to make trouble. This wasn't the peaceful, small-town atmosphere Emma was used to. As the gang entered the station, every eye was drawn to them. Emma tried to stay away, but then Razor spotted her and couldn't resist the opportunity to taunt her. Well, look at this little country girl," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Emma stood frozen, trying to stay calm, hoping they would just leave. But it didn't seem like Razor and his gang were going to just get gas and go. The tension in the air was palpable, and Emma couldn't ignore the way they circled her like vultures. Razor and the others continued their mockery, encircling Emma. With every taunt, her discomfort grew. He moved closer to her, eyes gleaming with malice. "I bet you've never met a real man before, huh?" he said, voice full of derision. "Are you looking for a ride or just trying to make a real man out of yourself?" Emma felt her hands tighten around the feed bags, her stomach churning. She wanted to ignore them, but she could feel their gaze cutting into her. She tried to block them out, but Razor was relentless, his taunts growing louder. David, her father, remained quiet as he filled the gas tank, his back turned. Emma could feel the tension in his body, though. He recognized trouble when he saw it. But he didn't step in yet. He didn't want to make a scene unless it was absolutely necessary. Then, Razor took another step toward her, and she felt cornered. Just as he was about to say more, David turned and looked at the bikers. His eyes were sharp, filled with quiet authority. As Razor stepped closer, the group of bikers laughed louder. "Leave her alone," David said in a low, controlled voice that silenced them instantly. David walked toward Emma and stood beside her. His presence was strong and unyielding, and he didn't flinch as Razor approached. "Leave her alone," David repeated, his voice calm but full of authority. Razor's smug smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "What's this? You're going to protect your little girl, old man?" he mocked. David didn't respond, but his stance was clear. The bikers hesitated, unsure of how to handle this man who stood so resolute. What the bikers didn't know was that David wasn't just a farmer. He wasn't some old man who could be pushed around. He was a decorated Marine, one of the toughest soldiers to walk the earth. David had served in multiple combat tours, receiving numerous medals, including the Navy Cross and Bronze Star. He'd fought in Afghanistan, in some of the fiercest battles imaginable. The memories of war, the loss of comrades, and the horrors he'd witnessed were things David had never shared with Emma. He had left that life behind when he moved to Silverwood to raise her. But now, faced with these bikers, David was ready to bring those skills back out, not for battle, but to protect his daughter. Razor stepped even closer, his voice lowering to a menacing growl. "You look like you need a real man to show you how it's done," he sneered. His face was inches from Emma's, but she refused to flinch. David stepped forward, placing himself between the bikers and Emma. "You need to leave," he said calmly, his gaze unwavering. Razor paused, seeing the determination in David's eyes. For a moment, it seemed like the atmosphere had changed. The bikers, who had been so confident before, now hesitated, unsure whether this old man was truly fearless or simply out of his depth. David's voice was steady. "You should leave now, and I won't have to do anything." The tension in the air grew thicker. Razor glanced at the bikers, and for the first time, he hesitated. They had expected David to back down, but he didn't. His calm and quiet authority made them uneasy. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. David didn't need to make threats. His presence alone was enough to make the bikers think twice. Razor raised his hand, signaling for his gang to back off. It wasn't that they were afraid of him. They were unsure, uncertain of whether or not to push their luck further. They slowly started to retreat, and David stood there, silently watching them go. News of David's quiet strength spread quickly through Silverwood. What had once been a quiet, isolated town began to feel like a place of community and strength. The people who lived there, once too passive and stuck in their ways, now looked at each other with newfound respect. David had unknowingly become a symbol of what it meant to stand up for what was right. People began to understand that sometimes strength didn't come from physical power, but from the ability to stand firm in the face of adversity. For Emma, this was a revelation. She had always admired her father, but now she saw him as more than just a protector. He was a teacher, a guide, and his lessons would stay with her forever. As Emma continued her studies at college, she found herself grappling with the changes in her life. Despite her growing confidence, she still missed the simple life in Silverwood. She often found herself thinking about her father, about the lessons he taught her about strength, resilience, and doing what was right. She learned that being away from home didn't mean she had to forget those lessons. In fact, it made her more determined to succeed. Every challenge she faced with the strength her father had instilled in her. Emma was no longer just the girl from Silverwood. She was becoming someone who could make a difference, someone who could stand up for what she believed in. One day, while Emma was walking across campus, she saw a familiar face. Jake, the leader of the Iron Wolves. He was standing at the edge of a group, but this time, he wasn't laughing or mocking her. His face was more somber, almost regretful. He noticed her and walked toward her slowly. This time, there was no taunting, no arrogance in his movements. He seemed almost apologetic, and Emma could feel the shift in his attitude. The same man who once tried to intimidate her now stood in front of her, a different person. "I didn't think you would stand up for yourself," Jake said, his voice low. "I misjudged you." Emma looked at him, unafraid, knowing that she wasn't the same person she was when they first met. "I've changed," she said, "and I won't let anyone push me around." Jake nodded, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. He didn't apologize, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. Sometimes, people changed, not because of others, but because of what they went through and who they became. Emma returned to Silverwood for a visit after several months. She saw her father, now older, his face marked by the years of hard work. But his eyes were still sharp, full of wisdom. "Are you okay, kiddo?" David asked gently. Emma smiled, her heart full of pride. She realized then that the lessons her father had given her, about strength, resilience, and honor, would never leave her. Silverwood had given her a solid foundation, and now she was ready to face the world. She had inherited more than just a piece of land. She had inherited her father's strength, his heart, and his unwavering resolve to do what was right. And with that, Emma knew she could take on whatever the world threw her way. As Emma settled into her new life at college, she quickly realized that the transition wasn't as easy as she had hoped. The bustling city felt so different from the tranquil rhythms of Silverwood, and for the first time in her life, she felt out of place. She missed the peace and quiet of the farm, her father's steady presence, and the familiarity of home. But Emma was determined to succeed. She joined study groups, took on leadership roles in various campus organizations, and slowly began to build a new life. While she still missed her old life, she could see her dreams beginning to take shape. With every lecture, every late-night study session, and every new friend she made, she felt herself becoming stronger and more confident. However, there was a part of Emma that struggled with the idea of leaving everything behind. The lessons her father had taught her, about humility, about hard work, about always standing up for what was right, were still with her. She knew that Silverwood would always be a part of who she was, but she also knew that her journey was just beginning, and she had to embrace it fully. While Emma was away at college, Silverwood continued to change. The incident with the Iron Wolves had left a lasting impact on the town. People who had once been complacent started to show more concern for one another. They became more active in their community, offering support when needed and standing up against any injustice, no matter how small. David, though he didn't seek recognition, became a quiet hero in the eyes of the townsfolk. His bravery, strength, and calm under pressure had inspired everyone in Silverwood to look out for one another more closely. It wasn't just about physical strength. It was about standing firm for what was right and doing so with dignity. The atmosphere of the town shifted, and people started to take pride in their ability to protect each other, just like David had done for Emma. It was a subtle change, but it was powerful. The people of Silverwood no longer felt small or insignificant. They felt united, empowered by the example set by one of their own. One winter break, Emma returned home to Silverwood. She had missed her father terribly and was eager to see how the town had evolved since she left. When she arrived at the farm, she was struck by the warmth of the place, the familiar smell of hay and fresh earth, and the quiet beauty of the landscape. David greeted her with a proud smile, his eyes reflecting the contentment of knowing that Emma was becoming the woman he always knew she could be. As they walked through the fields together, Emma noticed something different about him. There was a sense of peace in him, an inner calm that hadn't been there before. But as they continued their walk, Emma noticed a familiar figure approaching in the distance. It was Jake from the Iron Wolves. He was on a motorcycle, but this time, there was no cocky grin on his face. His posture was different, more subdued. When he saw Emma and David, he dismounted the bike, his head bowed. "I'm sorry," Jake said quietly, his voice sincere. "For everything. I was wrong." Emma and David exchanged glances. She hadn't expected this. Jake, the man who had once taunted her and her father, now stood before them apologizing. David didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at Jake with a calm, steady gaze. "It's not about the apology," David finally said. "It's about the change, and I see it in you. It's a start." Jake nodded, his eyes reflecting a deeper understanding of the world. He had been humbled by the lessons that Silverwood had to offer, the same lessons that had changed Emma and her father. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he was ready to move forward. After the visit from Jake, Emma found herself reflecting on the changes in her life. She realized that the growth she had experienced wasn't just about education or career goals. It was about understanding who she truly was and embracing her strength. She no longer needed to hide behind the expectations of others or feel inadequate in the face of challenges. Her father had taught her that strength wasn't about power. It was about resilience. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it was difficult. Emma realized that she could face any challenge, whether it was at school or in her personal life, because she had the tools to do so, tools her father had passed on to her. She was no longer afraid to take risks, to step out of her comfort zone. She had learned to embrace her independence, and with that independence came the courage to pursue her dreams. As Emma's confidence grew, so did the challenges she faced. She encountered setbacks and difficulties, but each one became a lesson. Emma had learned that nothing worth achieving came easily, and with every obstacle, she was becoming stronger. She started a new project at school, one that involved organizing a community service initiative to help local farmers who were struggling. This project was close to her heart, as it reminded her of the days spent with her father on the farm. Emma realized that by helping others, she was honoring the values her father had instilled in her. But the real challenge wasn't the project itself. It was learning how to manage her growing responsibilities while still staying true to herself. As she balanced her academic work with the service initiative, she realized that the most important thing was not how much she accomplished, but the kind of person she was becoming in the process. Months later, Emma returned to Silverwood for a short visit. As she walked through the town, she noticed how much it had changed. People were more connected, more supportive of one another, and they seemed to hold themselves with more pride. But as she entered the local diner, she saw something that made her pause. A group of Iron Wolves bikers had arrived. They were no longer the reckless, rude individuals who had once terrorized the town. They were quieter, more reserved. When Emma entered the diner, she felt a strange mixture of anger, resentment, and curiosity. Jake, who had been the leader of the gang, looked up from his seat. His eyes met Emma's, but this time there was no challenge in his gaze, only an understanding. He stood up, his demeanor much more respectful than it had been the first time they met. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low. "Not just for what I did to you, but for everything I ever stood for." Emma was taken aback. She hadn't expected such a genuine apology, but she could see in Jake's eyes that he had truly changed. The town of Silverwood had a way of doing that to people, making them face themselves and become better. As Emma looked around Silverwood, she realized just how much the town had shaped her. It wasn't just the land, the farm, or the hard work. It was the people, the community, and the values they held. The lessons her father had taught her were not just lessons for her, but for the entire town. Emma knew that the work her father had done was more than physical labor. It was about setting an example. His quiet strength had touched everyone, even those who had once been enemies. And Emma now knew that she could do the same, by standing up for what was right and helping others along the way. As Emma's final year of college approached, she was faced with a decision. She had the opportunity to pursue a prestigious job offer in a big city, but she hesitated. Silverwood had become more than just a place to visit. It had become a part of her heart. She knew that her future was waiting for her, but she also knew that she couldn't abandon the town that had shaped her. In the end, Emma decided to return to Silverwood, not as the girl who had left years ago, but as a woman who had learned and grown. She knew that there were challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. Her father had given her the foundation to succeed, and now it was her turn to pass that on to the next generation. Back in Silverwood, Emma took on a leadership role in the community, working to create initiatives that would support local farmers and bring more opportunities to the town. She worked closely with her father, who continued to provide guidance, and with Jake, who had now become an ally, to help improve the lives of those around them. Together, they faced challenges, but they also built something stronger. A community that valued resilience, respect, and hard work. And as Emma looked out at the land her father had worked so hard to build, she knew that she was home. The story of David and Emma was more than just about the triumphs and struggles of a father and daughter. It was about the power of family, community, and the strength that comes from standing together. Silverwood had taught Emma the most important lesson of all. True strength comes from within, and it's through standing firm for what's right that we make the world a better place. As Emma continued her journey, she carried with her the lessons of Silverwood, lessons of honor, courage, and love. And she knew that, no matter where life took her, she would always be guided by the strength of the land and the love of the people who helped shape her.